Well, as I have said previously, we have very strong relations as South Africa with the United States of America. Of course, given that the United States is the biggest economy in the world, it is an important country for us to have good relations with, from the economic, the business, and the social perspectives. It is one of our largest trading partners. You do know that AGOA is very important, not just to South Africa, but to the other African countries that benefit from the tariff arrangements that are related to AGOA. So we would like that trade relationship to grow even further.
Yeah.
We want to have more American companies investing directly in South Africa. As you know, President Ramaphosa wants to attract foreign direct investment into South Africa.
Yeah.
Our economic recovery and reconstruction plan does seek to bring in foreign investors to set up new plants, to invest in the key 6 economic sectors we've identified. So the United States is an absolutely vital international partner that we should build solid relations with.
Yeah.
But as I've said, we also need to give President Biden time to set out his foreign policy vision. I think we were encouraged by his inaugural speech. And as far as I recall, during the campaign that he led, there was no pejorative comment about any part of the world.
Yeah.
And so we are hopeful that we now have a decent person in the White House who will engage with Africa on the basis of seeking collaboration and partnership and not being in any way arrogant due to America's economic power.
Yeah, Minister, I'm going to resist the temptation to ask you about which president might have said pejorative things about the continent of Africa, but I think that's now old news. Let's move forward.
If we don't know, then it means Newsroom Africa is not doing its work, and I know you do your work very well.
Minister, as far as the African Union, the Biden administration, and I want you to tell me whether this is your understanding as well. The Biden administration is understood to be or to want to take an approach that is going to be that of supporting democratic institutions, particularly on the African continent. Is that the same understanding you have?
Well, the United States has always, through various state-supported institutions, played a role in seeking to enhance democracy in various countries. At times, that has come across and actually been very direct interference in the sovereign matters of various countries on the continent. If, however, the intention is to support the entrenching and sustaining of good governance, I think we should welcome that intention. But it is in how it is realized, the institutions through which it is promoted, and the principles and values that are part of that intention, which we as Africa would want to examine very closely. Our own impetus as South Africa is toward strong country partnerships with the African Union, because we have mechanisms and institutions under the ambit of the AU which do need strengthening and which would like to work with partners to become viable and impactful on the continent. So we would not accept a displacement of the African Union as the premier African organization advancing goals of development, good governance, and democracy.
Yeah. Minister, I want to focus the attention on the issue of democracy on the continent, particularly its strengthening. What's our country's attitude towards the recent Ugandan elections?
We're waiting for the final outcome to be declared. Thus far, we have heard concerns expressed about the degree to which the opposition parties were able to campaign freely. And of course, we're aware of the restrictions and the security actions against the leader, Bobby Wine, of one of the opposition parties. These are all reports that would be of concern to South Africa as chair of the African Union, but to any country on the continent, because in our own instruments and protocols, we promote open and free democratic practices. So I hope the final assessment of the Ugandan election will assure us that the election was free and fair, and that there won't be negative action against leaders of the opposition, because I think we should have open democratic systems and have multi-party activity and action without governing parties wanting to interfere with that.
Yeah, Minister, let me focus the attention a bit on this matter, because I think that you're too soft. And let me tell you why. The amending of the Constitution by Yoweri Museveni to eliminate the age limit of 75 for presidential candidates, disallowing election observers, the US and EU observers were blocked from entering that country. The internet access completely blocked, brutalizing his election opponents. And of course, this being used, or the people carrying out this brutalization, is the government security agents. My simple question to you, Minister, is: has the 76-year-old Yoweri Museveni made a mockery of democracy?
Well, I think that's for his country to judge. I'm not a voter in Uganda. And the point I'm making is that we would need to see a clear assessment, either through the African Union, as to its judgment of the election in Uganda. The reports that we have seen in the media are extremely worrying. And the clear point I'm making from the perspective of South Africa's own foreign policy is we believe every country on the continent must promote open, fair, and equitable democratic practices so that all who wish to contest can do so freely. Yeah. This is South Africa's perspective. And therefore, if a country is judged as not observing that, then it is not within our beliefs as South Africa. We also should be critical of legislators that allow such laws to be passed.
Minister, over 50 people died in that country in the lead up to the January election that we saw taking place this year. How is Yoweri Museveni different to the man he deposed, Idi Amin, probably the worst dictator that Africa has seen?
I'm not sure that you can compare the two. I do agree that there are troubling signs which we should all give attention to. But I don't think that President Museveni by any means could be comparable to the monster that he removed from office.
And Minister, whilst we are on this issue of Uganda, it has been said by observers all around that the African Union's voice is completely absent. What has the African Union said, particularly given that South Africa is nearing the end of its chairmanship of the Union?
Well, I think, Chloe, as you would know, the African Union has often had observer missions in all elections on the continent. The instance of COVID-19 has seriously affected our ability to observe elections and be able to express an opinion as to their free and fairness. So the voice of silence, or the silence that you referred to, is probably related to the fact that we do not have sufficient practical observation and experience of the processes of the election in Uganda and several other elections that have taken place in Africa since April last year.
Yeah.
This is why you see me being rather hesitant in expressing a full opinion. I think it is important that we look to the reports that we are receiving from some of the stakeholders. It has been mainly internal reports from Uganda that you're getting, with a few from civil society organizations that work with NGOs and political parties in Uganda. But I haven't seen a full assessment and report on the election outcome.
Yeah.
And it is that which causes me to not make a full judgment at this point.
And that is very worrying, Minister. I'm sorry to belabor the point. That is very worrying, because how then will institutions or bodies like the African Union make a much more decisive conclusion about whether or not the elections in Uganda were free and fair?
Well, it is the duty of the Commission to really oversee such processes. And I believe in the summit, we should get a report in early February on what has occurred in the past year. But you have to understand and accept that the processes have been limited by the pandemic. And we have not been able to act as is the normal course of the African Union, where we have electoral observer missions that are in countries during the campaign phase right up until after the outcome is declared. Yeah. We've not been able to do that this year, and perhaps that inability caused by the pandemic led to some weaknesses and to abuse of processes.
Yeah. Minister, let me move on then to the issue of the pandemic that you touched on. South Africa is a BRICS member. How are we leveraging our position as a member state within the BRICS formation to try and get access to the vaccines? India is already, I think, miles ahead of us.
Well, I wouldn't say miles, because they began vaccinating just this past weekend. And as you know, they're dealing with vast numbers compared to ourselves. Where they are streets ahead is in the fact that they have a vaccine that is now being produced in India. Our colleagues in health have been engaging with the Serum Institute of India, and we are promised a number of doses of the vaccine. I've personally been in touch with my colleague, the foreign minister, when we had this information that India was saying no export would be permitted. So we engaged, as did my colleague from Brazil and other foreign ministers, with India. And we now have the indication that we will get 1.5 million doses. And I think that just proves both the closeness of South Africa to India, but also the strong relationship that we have through BRICS.
Yeah, let's come closer to home then, Minister. Just over the border of Limpopo, the third cabinet minister in Zimbabwe, we understand, has succumbed to the coronavirus. What is your assessment as South Africa of that country's fight against this pandemic, and what is most needed? I imagine you are talking to them perhaps more than you should at the moment because of the worry of the increasing number of infections even closer here to South Africa, given that our borders are so close to one another?
Zimbabwe is a close friend and neighbor of South Africa. Let me express my sincere condolences at the passing of my colleague, Minister Moyo, Sibusisa Moyo. We had begun to work very well together, and I was devastated yesterday. I'm saddened terribly by his passing, because he was a very bright political leader, very good ideas about what should happen in Zimbabwe, open to discussing the problems and likely solutions, and very keen to work closely with South Africa. Given that we are neighbors, comrades, and friends, I think South Africa always stands ready to provide support to Zimbabwe and to help where Zimbabwe may indicate it requires assistance. But as South Africa, we can't impose ourselves on any country. The relationships must be of collaboration and cooperation.
Yeah.
But I know that as government and as the people of South Africa, we've always stood ready to help in the Southern African region, and where such help has practically been sought from us, we have provided a lending hand.
Minister Naledi Pandor, the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, thank you very much for your time. Much